that makes it strong. Now we're going to kind of step back in time, because even if you are checking for understanding, even if you're responding really strongly and appropriately to people's questions, and even if you're using a really professional and positive tone, if you don't know the content, like you can do all those three things and still have a session that flops. So now we're going to step back one step behind the actual facilitation. And we're going to think a little bit about rehearsal and preparation. So we've got the facilitation. What comes before the facilitation is the rehearsal, and what you have to do before you can rehearse it is internalize the content. So how do you think Lauren prepared differently? Like, what are some of the very specific things she did? I think it's easy for us to say, like, go prepare, go internalize, but like, what does that boil down to? What are some of the specific things you think she did? Yeah?
We spoke a little bit about how she anticipated that they would need their towel rubric before, for the session, so she had them take it out before we even started talking. And then also the stories that she was using, sort of like she knew exactly how she was going to connect what she was using with like a personal reference, so that it was like something you could relate to. And the understanding of what the rubric was.
Yeah, so they're kind of, I see these like two columns in my head. One is just the logistical like flow of activities. Visualizing how these things are going to happen, anticipating what it's going to look like, what problems you might encounter. Like, simple example, asking for people to get their materials out at the get-go before it interrupts the session and you get there. The second is content related. So you can know the flow of the agenda, but then do you really understand the material? And beyond that, can you think of the way it's going to connect to your core members and what they're currently encountering or dealing with or learning? And can you connect it in a very authentic way to your own experience so that when you share this, it's interesting to them, it's compelling to them, and you're really enthusiastic about it. So great. Any other things? Specific things she may have done? Yeah?
I feel like she had her questions prepped in advance and then strategically knew when she was going to ask them.
Yeah. You can plan to some degree checks for understanding, like in fact to a great degree. So know in advance, like in the middle of the session, what question could you ask? It's going to tell you whether or not people are getting it. And if they are not getting it, what can you do in that moment? It's not going to disrupt the flow too poorly, but it's going to ensure that at the end, people are at the outcomes that you want. Okay, so good. You've come up with a lot of these. So you're thinking about what questions core members might have in advance. In the faculty supplements for the CMA sessions, there will often be, like, I don't know the exact name of the section, but basically it lists, bullets out common misunderstandings about this material. Basically read those, think about those. The list may not be comprehensive, but it's kind of like an automatic list of questions that core members might have. Be prepared to respond to those. Think about what stories you will tell and why. Again, make it personal to both you and to your core members. If it's personal to them, they'll be more compelled by it. If it's personal to you, you'll be more engaged and your facilitation will be all the better for it. Visualize how the activities will unfold and what we're getting to now, actually rehearse the session.
Erin, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Just to draw the distinction between sessions that are created for you and sessions that you create yourself. Because really what we're talking about right now are sessions that are created for you, and there's going to be a number of them, in which case you have the benefit of having the hot spots outlined for you and actually even the questions crafted for you. But someone mentioned that you're going to be actually designing mini lessons for lesson planning clinics in which there's no script to guide you. You're actually creating those sessions yourself. So I think you want to be thinking about, when I'm in the mode of session creation, let me make sure that my sessions are operating this way. And then I think out of the corner of my ear, heard you talking about checks for understanding, which I actually think too. Have you ever been in a room, maybe I'm going to do it right now, I'm asking a rhetorical question right now, where someone asks such a low level question that you're sort of like, do you really want me to answer that? It's almost kind of awkward. That I think is, when they ask you to say like, so can you just like repeat something, like a question that basically asks you to just like simply regurgitate something back to you. And you can see like with adults, it just doesn't fly. People are like, that's weird. Why are you asking me to do that? And I actually think that undermines partnership. It's more like I actually even think in that example, a better question would have been something like, what's the rubric thing? And then who could say that in their own words? Let's really make sure we understand that. Who could say that in their own words? With adults, it needs to be more challenging, or else it honestly becomes uncomfortable for the room. So something that I think you just want to be thinking about, and I think it's challenging, and I think it's something with your partner CMAs you know, buddy up and say, like, design these things together and say, like, what would be the question that we would ask her that won't be low level? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's going to check your own understanding, because I think there's a blessing and a curse to these session plans that are written for you. Like, you kind of get this mentality, like, it's all there, the answers are there, I'll be able to spit them back out. But when the question pops up, you don't have the 2 minutes to, like, find the spot, read the exact language, think about it, and spit it back out. Okay, great. Let's see, okay, so now we're moving on to actually rehearsing things. Now, you very clearly are not going to have time to rehearse this entire session. So what you're going to have to do is think, like, what are the most advantageous things for you to rehearse? And there, I think, will be 2 ways to identify that. One is to go back to what we were just talking about, the misunderstandings that you're anticipating core members have. Like, what is kind of the thick material or the material that maybe they've not thought about or encountered before? And then 2, what is a situation that's just going to be hard for you to clearly articulate? Either because you don't know it that well yourself, or maybe it's some material that for some reason makes you feel uncomfortable, or you don't have that personal experience with it. But for whatever reason, do take a moment to just think, like, what out of this whole session should I rehearse and why? And what can I just, like, count on myself to do right? So Lauren, can you give us, or is she?
I'm right here. Sorry.
Like, in your rehearsal of what you just did, how did you determine? Because I know Lauren and I got on the phone a couple times this week, so we did rehearse. But, like, we didn't get on the phone for 90 minutes and go through this whole session. So how would you decide, make the call between what to rehearse and what not?
So I've done CMA twice now. I've done it twice at Institute. And so I think that there's a couple spots in it that are a little bit tricky. I think for me, I mean, I'm a program director, and so I guess maybe I should say that. So I think that the rubric is really important. And I think that the way that you introduce it to your core members kind of sets the tone for the summer. And so I think that making sure that you're comfortable talking about it and making sure that you're kind of excited about introducing the rubric really sets the right tone for your core members for the summer. So that was definitely something. Then the other part is, I mean, initially, again, kind of setting the tone is the beginning of the session. I mean, this is really your first time standing up in front of your core members and, like, putting yourself out there as their leader for the summer. And so I think you need to make sure that, like, you get the right story, and the story sends the right message to your core members about, like, the work that you're doing this summer and why you feel like your core members are the right people to join you in this mission.
Okay. And just on the note of rehearsal, we have integrated into your training as a CMA, there will be several places where you are given time to rehearse. There are some places where you will not have, like, a formal designated time to rehearse, but we do expect it for every session, whether we set aside some time for us to do it collectively or whether you're expected to do it independently, that it happens. Okay, so just to kind of, like, really drive this point home, strong facilitators are strong preparers. So now we've talked about the facilitation, we've talked about the rehearsal, going back one more step in time, like the cognitive steps that you go through. And this sounds really simple, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, but really you just need to look at a session plan, put it aside, and think, do you really fully know what core members need to know, why they need to know it, and how they'll learn it? Like, that's just a real simple way to break it down. And you can get that in all sorts of places in these session plans. I mean, you can get it from the objectives, from the agendas, but to really synthesize it and then think about it this clearly, if you can do that, you'll be in a good spot. All right, so now that we kind of have boiled it down in these ways, we know that there are 3 things that facilitators do. They check for understanding, they respond in the moment, and they use the tone that establishes partnership. And we know that what they do up to that facilitation, they reverse hot spots, and then they are able to articulate what core members will know, why they need to know it, and how they'll learn it. We're going to do that, not the rehearsal piece, but we are going to start looking at CMA 1. So you're going to have some time to just read through the faculty supplement. It will sound a little more familiar to you than if you're picking one up for the first time, because you've seen both Lauren and I just be part of it. And then handout 2 is kind of an internalization guide for you to help you through this process. And in upcoming